to say so. And tellingly, none of them have, because we're not outside of our rights. We're perfectly entitled to go and do this in a democracy.
Okay, so I'm glad you realize that the comparison is quite flawed between what the ANC did during apartheid and what you're doing now. You've just mentioned now that you are facing chronic unemployment. What numbers do you have that we don't have? Because my understanding, having looked at Stats SA, is that unemployment is more rife among the black population and not among the white population. Even if I can take 50,000 white people in the Western Cape against 50,000 black people there, the numbers will tell that specific story. Do you want to share with us the numbers that demonstrate that chronic unemployment amongst white people in the Western Cape?
Well, look, so first of all, and I think this is a really good example of the problems in South Africa, you've instantly gone to black and white. This has got absolutely nothing to do with black and white. I'm talking about the Western Cape people. The Western Cape people, the largest group are coloured, the second largest group are black, and the smallest group are white. So you're making the assumption that we're fighting for Cape independence for white people, but we absolutely aren't. I authored the Western Cape People's Bill, which very clearly talks about those three racial groups all collectively making up the Western Cape people as established in the Western Cape Constitution. And what do we have in the Western Cape? We've got an unemployment rate of 20%. Now that's half the rate in South Africa, which is a feather in the cap of the Western Cape, but more than double the G20 average. So here we are in a situation where the Western Cape, 1 in 5 people in the Western Cape are needlessly unemployed as a result of government policy for a government that the people of the Western Cape have voted against for 30 years. This is surely understandable. And actually, why do we always have to go to race? That's exactly the issue. Isn't South Africa supposed to be a non-racial country? That is one of the things that we're fighting for. We want a non-racial country, and it's all right for the president to talk about, hang on a second, we want non-racialism, but actually we've got more race laws now than at any time during apartheid.
So, sorry, Craig, are you saying that the Western Cape has the highest levels of unemployment? The last I checked, we were looking at, I think, Eastern Cape, the Northwest. Is that the numbers that you have, that the Western Cape actually has the highest levels of unemployment?
No, that's not what I said at all. I said South Africa has got 40%, just over 40%, these 41.6 at the expanded rate, and the Western Cape's at 20. What I said is that the Western Cape is half of South Africa's number because it's better governed, but it's double the average of G20. In other words, it's good, but it's better than the rest of South Africa, but it's still absolutely terrible by any international measure, and that's a result of national government economic policy. Okay,
so the Western Cape doesn't have chronic unemployment compared to other provinces in South Africa?
Well, it's got chronic unemployment. 20% absolutely is
compared to other provinces.
The other provinces are worse. But hear me, it's got chronic unemployment.
Yeah, so but when you say we've got chronic unemployment here, that's a suggestion that you're making. So you do understand that there are other provinces actually that are suffering the highest levels of unemployment, far worse than the Western Cape.
But what is the point you're trying to make, Clement? You're trying to suggest that we in the Western Cape should put up with 20% unemployment because actually it's worse in the rest of the country because there it's even worse governed than here. We want to be well governed. You know, Limpopo, with the best will in the world, elected the ANC. KZN elected, or now almost MK. The Eastern Cape elected the ANC. So if they're really badly governed because the national government is enacting terrible economic policy, at least they voted for it. Here in the Western Cape, we didn't. We didn't.
Well, I'm not suggesting that you have to put up with it. I'm just trying to correct what you're saying so that the viewers don't get the wrong message. When you are creating an impression that you're going to run to the US to engage Trump because you want Cape independence, and one of the issues you are dealing with is the chronic unemployment, the suggestion there is that it is that bad in the Western Cape that it requires another government to intervene. I want the viewers to understand that that's not the case. When you talk about chronic unemployment, that is not in comparison to other countries, to other provinces in the country. And that's similar to the point AfriForum was making about farm murders. Yes, there are farm murders, but the impression they're trying to create is that for some reason white people are under siege, when in fact when you look at the numbers, that is not the case. It's people who live in farms who get killed, who are victims of crime. So I want the viewers to get that. How are you going to move around the Constitution here? Because this doesn't align with our democratic values. We are a democratic society that embraces a singular, non-racial society. So Which part of the Constitution, in your understanding, allows for such a cessation from South Africa?
Okay, well, first of all, let's just dispel some myths. We're not a non-racial country. We're a deeply racialized country. We've got 142 race laws. We have BEE, we have affirmative action, we have race quotas in sport. We absolutely are not a non-racial country. We're a deeply racialized country. So let's get that absolutely straight to start off. Now, you asked me where in the Constitution do we get this right from? Well, in a number of places. First and foremost, Section 235, the right of self-determination. The right of self-determination for the South African people as a whole does not preclude other groups, so that there you could start. And you can also go to international law. The right of self-determination is a fundamental principle of international law, which South Africa has repeatedly sworn to uphold since 1994, and the ANC are outspoken supporters of self-determination for Palestine, for the Western Sahara. So the ANC support self-determination. The South African Constitution enables self-determination. So if the Western Cape people come along and say we'd like to enact our right to self-determination, what constitutional barrier exists to stop them?
I mean, if you're so confident that the Constitution allows for it, why haven't you gone straight to the Constitutional Court to see that realized? Have you ever tried that?
Well, what would we go to the Constitutional Court for at this point? And the first thing we need to do is have a referendum to determine the democratic will of the Western Cape people. The Constitutional Court has certified Section 235. I can talk you through the certification. It's a very significant note, but at this point it's irrelevant, because the first step in the process is to establish the democratic will of the Western Cape people, which should happen in a referendum, which the DA promised to call and then went back on their word, with the Constitution allows. And our first port of call is to try and force a referendum on Cape independence. And actually, that is probably the primary objective that we have going overseas, to raise funding to help us to work towards that referendum, and to see if we can get political pressure placed on the Western Cape government to call the referendum, because right now,